Today I'm gonna explain a 2006 American horror movie called Snakes on a Plane. The movie began with the superb seaside city of Hawaii where a person was riding his dirt bike across a track very handily. He rode through the woods and took a long leap. Later he showed up at a place where he witnessed his injured dad hanging upside down. His father asked his kid to leave at once. He locked himself in the bush and watched the awfulness as a person named Eddie Kim showed up wearing a white suit and utilizes a baseball stick to slay his father, who was an investigator. The fear inundated him and he got away on his bicycle. Later, he sat in his home under tremendous bereavement. He was watching the news where the expression of his dad was displayed when out of nowhere certain individuals breaks in his door. After glancing through the peephole, the man saw Eddie's men were waiting to execute him outside. To save himself, he hurried to the back where another man forced him behind the wall and continued to kill the culprits. A short time later, the two of them got away from the house. Furthermore, the new person presented himself as an agent Flynn from FBI. The bloke introduces himself as Sean. Flynn inquired him for what reason he didn't go to the police if he witnessed Eddie committing a homicide, upon which Sean just expresses that he wasn't sure if the cops were corrupted or not. The specialist appreciated his intelligence and brought him to be interrogated and given him the obvious picture of what will occur if he doesn't collaborate. Sean still remained silent. However, Flynn figured out how to persuade him to testify against Eddie Kim. Later, the scenario then moved to Honolulu International Air Terminal, where the camera shows two air hostesses advancing towards the flight. In the meantime, three popular rap singers got encircled by the fans. The three Gs gave the signature and strolled towards the boarding terminal. In the interim, the air hostess made it to their plane. Another unexpected thing was they all celebrated upon one's transfer named Claire. Later we saw another traveler woman with a Chihuahua dog greeting a couple who was sitting opposite to her. On the other hand, Claire gets the message from the captain that FBI was escorting someone to LA and they forcefully reserved the entire first-class seats and she has to be the one to break the news to them. During all the boarding, the camera moves to two workers. One of them tells the flight number to somebody over call if the need arises, while another person showers the lace flower with pheromones. Meanwhile, Flynn strolls to the first class with Sean, where Claire needs to bargain with disappointed travelers of first class, who now need to go in the coach. As Sean gets comfortable in the Shamsha's cabin, Flynn approaches to converse with his companion, Specialist Harris, about Eddie Kim. Agent Harris guarantees that Eddie ain't going anyplace. In the meantime, the circumstance goes to the coach beneath where a corporate person gets irritated by the Chihuahua and the one who sits alongside him with her child. The inconsiderate man gets up in fury and leaves. All of a sudden, the three Gs enter the coach and start remarking on a bulky lady. In the meantime, the young lady with her dog outstandingly gazes at the rapper. Down there, two little youngsters also get ready to travel alone after everybody gets comfortable. The steward and the air hostess remain in the aisle while the pilot gives them initial instructions. In Sean's cabin, a lovely air hostess appeared with her front button undone, and Sean enjoyed each and every piece of her shape. After the aircraft flies into the air, everybody continues with their usual business, and the hostess came to Sean to present herself as Tiffany. Sean educates her concerning his testification, upon which the young lady gets marveled. The camera then moved to the cargo region where we witness a copious amount of snakes being kept with a timer of 2 hours taking to be blasted. Up in the coach, everybody goes on with their typical schedule. Another Asian traveler was seated who was voyaging for kickboxing. In the interim, Flynn proceeds downstairs and continues to converse with Claire, who gets a minimal vacation for commandeering the airplane on a very short notice. Flynn treats it casually and moves away. Then again the rapper calls the young lady with Chihuahua named Mercedes to sit close to him and gossip with her. Mercedes gets all quietish and allows her dog Mary Kate run all around the rapper, who gets super discomfort. With that, below the cargo area, the clock strikes zero and with an impact the entire container unleashes the snakes and they begin to spread around the place. The occasion took a turn as the horny couple goes to the closet and disables the smoke caution from the roof. They smoke weed and continue to make out. Yet the snakes crawl down the opening in the roof and assault them mercilessly. The two of them begin screaming, also beating against the toilet door, while the steward and the hostess notice the groans in satisfaction. They don't realize the snakes have turned belligerent. They wreck the circuit system of the aircraft, making them lose the avionics. In the interim, the serpents make their direction into the coach and progressively scatter all over the place. A young lady evades one by only a couple inches. Then again a person goes into the latrine to pee, yet gets assaulted by a snake who not into his masculinity. The fellow shouts and jumps in craziness, inflicting himself with a lethal physical injury. Later a snake creeps his way up to the alcoholic lady, who begins to appreciate its vibe down there. Tragically, another inconvenience descends over them as the plane enters the turbulence under an outrageous climate. It begins to shake and everybody gets alarmed. Meanwhile, one of the pilots goes down to reset the breakers for the flight, however gets bitten by a vicious viper. The venom raced into his body and the ill-fated man perishes. Rick and Claire learn his immobility and Rick lifted him up, while Claire hurries to the first class to bring Specialist Flynn and Specialist Sanders. As they examine the entire upsetting circumstance, Rick starts to fly the plane alone while Claire rushed back to the coach to administer the individuals. She consoles the young kids and handed them a game for diverting their mind. During this, the turbulence escalated and the baggages begin to fall down. The passenger gets chased. Meanwhile, Rick confronts one more frightful circumstance as snakes begin to slither their way in the passenger area. He hits them with the notepad and unintentionally deploys the breathing apparatus in the coach, which summon all the hazard. On the travelers, as the upper compartments open, the serpents drop along with the breathing mask. Shit hits the fan as the snakes begin invading everybody and the circumstance get exacerbating the pandemonium. The individuals begin shouting as the snakes attack the entire spot. The alcoholic woman gets chomped in his eye while others run for their lives. The snakes unleash devastation all over the cabin, and even Agent Sanders turns into the casualty of their venomous neighbors. Flynn utilizes his electric taser to clear his way, yet the passengers begin dying. Claire and the others figured out how to push them ahead, furthermore make an honest effort to adapt to the circumstance, however the snakes become ruthless. Meanwhile, a monstrous cobra shows up before the two young men and beats Tommy's arm, while another person gets killed being trampled. The rapper named Clarence races to the latrine to conceal himself, yet the dead corpse of the couple fall on him. The aggravation rises and everybody runs for their lives. Subsequent to saving the majority of them, Flynn orders them to utilize the bags to build a makeshift wall against the vipers in the coach. Then everybody starts stacking up their luggages. The camera then shows us Mercedes stuck in the coach with a snake approaching towards her threateningly. But fortunately, the kickboxer comes in the nick of time to save her. Mercedes jumps on his back and the two of them fled. On the other hand, Flynn and Claire find the young kids while Tommy's arm can be seen intensely swollen. All of a sudden, another senior hostess named Grace hears a child cry in the coach. She breaks a defensive wall and runs inside to discover the child sitting inches away from the snake. She gets him in one piece, however gets chomped in the rear area. Despite that, she runs back, delivers the child to his mom, and comes to the safety. The situation escalates as Agent Sanders in fine dies, and Flynn calls Specialist Harris to let him know regarding the entire occurrence and how Eddie Kim has figured out how to load the entire plane with toxic snakes to kill everyone on board. Agent Harris recognizes the gravity of the circumstance and asks everybody in his cabin to find a viper expert for him. Back in the plane, Sean oversees assistance. Be that as it may, Flynn chides him and orders him to remain in the cabin. On lower floor, one individual from the 3Gs who got nibbled in the hips gets taken to extract the toxin. However, he wouldn't let that happen. All of a sudden, we witness the declining state of Tommy's arm. The woman who was present on the spot utilizes her knife to incise the area to eliminate the poison. In the meantime, the rappers have fun notwithstanding the grave condition. Later, Agent Harris figures how to meet Dr. Price, who was a snake specialist. They take him in the vehicle and Harris calls Flynn to converse with the specialist. Dr. Price stated that there should be something in the aircraft triggering the snakes. It may be pheromones responsible for hyperaggression. As Flynn converses with the specialist, the travelers got desperate and forced their way to the first class to confront Flynn. Sean gets up and explains everything. Upon that, Flynn decided to lead them, furthermore orders them to bring all the deceased viper so they can be identified for the antivenom. In the meantime, in the cockpit, Rick is attacked too and falls down in the storage. Then again, Mercedes offers her mobile to email each of the photos to Dr. Price so that he can recognize the snakes to find a cure. Shockingly, the plane gets unsteady as there is no pilot. Flynn instructs everybody to buckle up and rushes to the cockpit where Claire was battling with a monster snake. She somehow manages to kill it. Furthermore, the two of them deal with the controls to lift the plane back up. However, the struggle goes in vain. Back at the coach, the serpents begin killing the people as they attack the spot once more. Sean advises everybody to run upstairs to first class, and everybody makes their direction on the stairs. All of a sudden, a massive boa drops from the roof, and the immense snake claws his way towards them. Lamentably, the stairs can't endure the weight, and the bolster breaks, and everybody falls down, and the corporate guy gets constricted by the boa. Every other person races to the first class and attempts to invade the stair. Later we see Flynn contacts the control tower, who guided them to pull up immediately prior to hitting the sea surface. Flynn and Claire effectively endeavor to pull it up and save it from the accident. Meanwhile, Rick additionally shows up from the cabin where the air conditioner stopped working, along with the other HVAC system. Then again, Dr. Price recognizes every one of the snakes as outlandish and unlawful and very hard to discover in the US. In this way, the antivenin will be even harder to find. Back in the plane, Clearness loses his cool and, being agitated, starts pushing everybody in the outrage. Yet his companion figure out how to placate him, and he sits back in his place. All at once, the misfortune hits the aircrew as Grace bites the dust because of the poison. Claire grieves intensely on the demise of her, yet Flynn consoles her and continues to activate the AC from the cargo region. Claire offers him a handmade flamethrower, and he walks down the stairs through a mesh of wires and reaches the air conditioning board after fending off the snakes. In the act of battling vigorously, he manages to set the air conditioner back to work, and everybody above gives a huge sigh of alleviation. The scene now moves to a desert region where the FBI strikes a person's compound for reserving illegitimate snakes and harvesting them. The person runs for his life, yet Harris shot the person and he gets assailed by his own snakes. Harris compels the person to give him the details of the snakes he sold to Eric Kim, along with the antidote for every one of these toxic snakes. Back at the plane, Flynn returns like a legend, and everybody shows him appreciation for supplying them air to relax. In addition, he obtains the good news from Harris, where the antitoxin, yet shockingly they discover Rick perished in his cabin. Now, as they need to descend, just one of the gamer folks from 3Gs named Troy knows how to fly a plane. Flynn gets exceedingly annoyed with the snakes and said to get salvation from them for the last time. To execute their plan, everybody fastens quick to the seats while Flynn takes shots at the window to break it. The heavy air force causes everything to fly out along with the snakes. During the drastic turbulence, Tiffany nearly flies out of the plane, yet Sean saves her life in the nick of time. Then again, Troy and Flynn direct themselves to the cockpit and get seated. Troy gets excessively energized and calls the control tower, where the authorities get vexed by his unpracticed and amateurish demeanor. Considering all the things, Flynn proposes that he is the one in particular who knows the controls. In this way, Troy gets certain about himself. Furthermore, orders them to clear the runways. Meanwhile, he instructs all the travelers to prepare for the descent, and he maneuvers the aircraft towards the runway and effectively lands it on the ground. However, doesn't slow down the plane. Flynn gets crazy, however, Troy at last turns it to a side and makes a halt. After a moment of quietness, they begin cheering in delight after the hazard and are free from any harm on the ground at the air terminal. The rescue crew show up and the cops also, and everybody encompasses the plane. They slipped down the airplane slide and took all the travelers out. Meanwhile, Harris and Dr. Price additionally reach with the antivenom and administer the injured passengers, including Tommy. Later, Flynn thanks Sean for his succor and assistance in the plane. However, Sean gets assaulted by a horrendous snake in the chest. As he screams in dread, Flynn shoots the man in the chest and he falls down the evacuation slide. Tiffany and Claire were aghast, seeing the occurrence. Furthermore, they approach him to discover him absolutely protected due to the impenetrable vest. As everybody was safe and sound, the last scenario of the movie shows us that Flynn asking Claire out for a date, while Sean getting a fervent kiss and phone number from Tiffany. Sean and Flynn become companions. Later we witness the two of them go on sunboarding in Bali, and with that the movie Snakes on a Plane draws the conclusion. Well, Thanks for watching.